If you get nothing else from this episode, I hope it is that you are too beautiful and life is too short for situationships. So, welcome to Christianish. This is the podcast for women who have Bibles but don't necessarily have boundaries. And talking about boundaries and protecting our energy, I wanted to talk about how situationships waste your time. Because I have seen so much online about situationships. I've seen posts about people having sneaky links, and I get it. I get this whole idea that, especially if you're younger, you think that this is fun and it's casual and it's not a big deal. But I want to point out a few things that may have you reconsidering that. Because what situationships are not just a casual way for you to hook up. And they're not just a way for you to pass time and have someone to cuddle with now that we're starting to head into fall and, cuffing season is about to be here. They are romantic purgatory. Because the problem with situationships is that they are casual until they're not. They're intimate, but there's no commitment. And you're seeing someone, but it's not going anywhere. And oftentimes, what situationships will do is leave you in a situation where you're stuck on red, you're waiting for plans that never come, and you're confused about where you stand with this man. So let's talk about how we got here. Situationships are nothing new. I am a millennial. So if you came of age in the late 90s or early 2000s, then this was all over the place. Of course, back then you didn't call it a situationship, you called it friends with benefits. But this whole concept, there was a movie called Friends with Benefits, right? There was another movie, No Strings Attached. TV shows like Sex and the City, Gossip Girl, Friends. All of these shows had story arcs that involved the whole friends with benefits situation. And it was always this vibe of, oh yeah, we're sleeping together. Emotionally, we're tangled up with each other, but we're not going to call it love. And there are a few problems with that, which is why we're going to talk about the psychology behind this. There are a few reasons why women often end up in these situationships. One is fear of rejection or fear of abandonment. Because it's easier to settle for something that seems like it's almost enough, or like it's good enough, than to risk giving a hard no or getting a hard no. You'll take a piece of a man because you don't want that man to completely say no to you. Another reason is how addictive ambiguity can be. Because when you're in situations like this, you end up in a relationship where the highs are really high, the lows are really low, and you set up this dopamine loop where your brain is constantly chasing the new high, and that new high always involves drama. And then, you have to look at your attachment styles as well. Because when you have this whole push-pull between a person who is anxious and a person who's avoidant, you end up with this situation that is close enough for you to feel good, but there's enough distance in it for you to feel safe. Because, God forbid you admit to real feelings and again have to deal with that possibility of rejection. But at the end of the day, the reason why a lot of women end up in situationships is because you are afraid to ask for more. Because there's a part of you that already knows you're not going to get it, at least not from this person. And that hurts. So you would rather, again, take a piece of someone and settle for that. But if you are a woman, you are not winning in these situations, in these situationships, no matter what. For starters, you are giving up too much. Even when you are married, there are so many studies that bear this out, right? Married women, and I am married myself, I'm not knocking marriage, but it is known statistically that married women end up doing more emotional labor, the type of nurturing labor, mental labor in relationships than the husbands typically do. And this is the case even when you have a good husband, a quote unquote good husband, because of the way that we've been conditioned by society. I love my husband, and my husband does what he can to, alleviate any loads off me. But you do sometimes find yourself slipping into those gendered stereotypes. And then, I sometimes have to force myself to take a step back, and allow my husband to step up and do more. And again, this isn't a marriage, right? So that is times 10 when you're talking about a situationship. If you are in a situationship with a man, you're going to end up giving so much more emotional support than what you receive. You're also going to be giving effort, time, sex, and you're doing all of this for someone who won't even define what your relationship is. And before you say something like, you just want to get laid too, or you just want someone to cuddle with too, and you don't really care about all of that, okay. If that's truly the case, that's fine. But again, is it really worth all the effort that you're putting into to get that? Because, you could get a battery operated boyfriend, and do so much less, right? But also, if you are serious about being in a relationship, and if you're listening to me, you probably are, you're blocking your own blessings because you're entangled in what's not a relationship, and that is making you emotionally unavailable to anyone who would be willing to show up and be there for you and commit to you. But also, because on this podcast we focus a lot on boundaries, the boundaries get blurry in situationships. 1 minute the relationship is casual, and then the next minute you're upset because he's leaving you on red and not texting back, and you feel like you shouldn't care because you're supposedly casual, but then you do care. And the other thing that I want you to keep in mind is that these situationships, and I think this is the most important one, it erodes your self-trust because it leads to you questioning what your needs are, what your standards are, and your gut instinct. Being in a situationship is being a placeholder. And you can say that, yeah, the man is also a placeholder for you until you find something better. But again, back to the previous point that I made, while you're entangled in this situation because energy is a thing, while you're entangled in the situation, you're not going to truly be available to anyone who would be a good match for you. So, this is what I want you to do instead. First of all, you need to date with intention. You need to get clear on the things that you want. Do you want partnership? Do you want consistency? Do you want love? And if you want those things, then stop tolerating crumbs, right? Stop tolerating something that sort of looks like that, but isn't actually that. If you want a real connection, then that requires a real relationship. The other thing that you need to do is you need to heal your relationship with boundaries. The main problem that I have with situationships is that you are giving access to you to someone who doesn't deserve it. Because if you know how valuable you are, if you truly understand that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, if you truly know that you are that girl, then it shouldn't be so easy for someone to just come into your life and get sex, get companionship, get whatever, whenever they want, and then just leave whenever they want. And talking about you being that girl and you being powerful, you need to recognize how powerful your attention is. Feminine energy is healing, it is nurturing, it adds creativity, it adds inspiration, it adds beauty into the lives of the people around you. And your attention is also currency. So I really want you to be careful with how you spend it. Not just in your romantic relationships, in all your relationships, in your relationships with family, friends, in your career, you should constantly be aware of how you're spending your attention, but especially when it comes to romantic relationships. And I also want you to use a little bit more discernment. Don't be afraid to ask difficult questions early. Don't be afraid to ask someone where they see this relationship going, what it is they're truly looking for. And if someone's telling you that they're just trying to chill or they just want to see how it goes, don't let them waste your time. Because, yes, a situationship has the potential to teach you about what you want and what you'll tolerate and all of that. But you know what's even better? What's better is learning those things in an actual relationship, is learning those things in an environment where you have the safety to learn those things without constantly spiraling and worrying about defining what this person's relationship to you is. It is time for you to start learning how to choose better. You don't need to convince another person to see your worth. And if someone looks at you and they don't see that you're worthy of something real, something connected, something honest, then you need to walk away from that. So if this episode hit home for you, then please share it with someone else who you think they could also relate. And if you're looking for help with killing these toxic relationships once and for all, getting out of the situationship loop, getting out of unhealthy relationships, and finally attracting someone who is healthy, who is whole themselves, and who you can form a real, true, genuine partnership with, then I would love to help you with that. There's a link in the description to book a call with me, and we can talk about what that looks like. But I want to leave you with this. You are not, and you never have been, hard to love. You're just surrounding yourself by people who don't know how, and that needs to change. I love you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.